Hey everybody, thanks for coming to our Maintainer Track Talk here in London. Let's have a look at the State of Backstage in 2025. I'm Avantika, I'm an engineering manager at Spotify, and here on stage are my colleagues who are also Backstage maintainers, Ben, Fredrik, Patrik, and Vincenzo. You'll hear more from them as we carry on. So we've got a pretty massive agenda today, but we'll be starting by celebrating what is a really historic moment for Backstage, and then we'll look into some project areas updates, framework updates, and then have a look at running Backstage at Spotify scale. Okay, project updates. First, happy birthday Backstage. The project we all love has turned 5 years old. So just 5 years ago, the folks on this stage got together to bring our internal developer portal Backstage to the open source. And here we are all here today, 5 years later, talking about all the great things that we've accomplished together as a community. So this is what we've achieved in 5 years. We're up to roughly 3,400 adopters. That's 12.5% up from what we saw last in Salt Lake City, if you joined us there. We're at about 230 open source plugins. A lot of them are now in the community plugins repo, and some others are kind of still out there in the wild, but hopefully moving to that repo. And we're nearly at 30,000 stars. So if anyone in this room has not had a chance to go and start the repo yet, please do it now, because we really want to hit that 30,000 number before this talk ends. Before we continue, let's take a moment to celebrate all of you, the maintainers, the community, and everyone who's made this project wildly successful. Let's keep this going, yeah? And get those numbers up like even stronger the next time we come back to this. So let's begin by looking at some of the highlights from the last couple of months. First up is the Scaffolder project area, which consists of Bogdan from Bull.com and other core maintainers. There's been a push to roll out checkpoints for Scaffolder actions in the last few releases. What checkpoints do for Scaffolder actions is make them idempotent. Sorry about that. You can safely retry actions without the risk of conflicts. We're not going to dive into technical details here, but Ben and Patrik did give a talk about it in the last KubeCon at Salt Lake City, so tune into that talk and you can learn more about it. We've also introduced autocomplete support for repo URL picker, so now when you're filling out the Scaffolder template form, you're going to see suggestions of existing repositories and organizations in the drop-down list instead of having to manually type them out. On to the community plugins project area. The community plugins project is growing pretty rapidly. We have reached 97 workspaces in the mono repo. That's 21% up since the last KubeCon. The general feedback we have been getting from plugin authors is that people really love the community plugins mono repo, especially the way it's set up. More companies are moving their plugins into the community plugins mono repo. They're finding it easier to maintain their plugins without having to maintain a separate CI pipeline or a release pipeline. They're getting better feedback from other plugin authors, and it's helping them build more stable plugins. And Backstage adopters tend to trust these plugins a lot more because they live in that repository, right? Making them more willing to use these plugins over other plugins out there. A huge thank you to all the plugin maintainers and the community plugins project area maintainers, Beth and Kashish from Red Hat and Andre from Spotify for making this repo so very successful. We also have some great new updates in the Open API project area, thanks to Aramis from DoorDash. Open API documentation that gets generated from an Open API schema for each of the backend plugins is now embedded in the microsite. When you browse plugin docs on backstage.io documentation site now, you'll find a way more interactive experience, kind of similar to Swagger. We've also got built-in support for schema testing in Jest now. Previously, we used a tool called Optic to do schema validation, but now it has been implemented in-house to make the experience a lot smoother. The Scaffolder plugin will soon have and support Open API schema. There's still a bit of work pending on that one, but it will be shipped soon. Now to Patrik, who will take you through some exciting new project areas in Backstage.
All right, thank you. So now over to something completely new. Last year we hinted at the creation of a new design system, and now we have a project area for exactly that. Maintainers are Charles, with a little bit of support for myself, and the area is responsible for our new design system that we call Canon. The long-term goal is to fully replace Material UI and the Backstage core components, bringing everything together into a single component library. Apart from reducing fragmentation, a big driver for this work is to have a library that is more opinionated and easier to theme, and also being tuned to more information-dense UIs. That said, we're really not interested in building and maintaining a full component library from scratch. Instead, Canon is built on top of an unstyled component library called Base UI. This lets us focus on the styling and curating and composing components rather than implementing everything from scratch. Now, this is of course very recent, and Canon itself is in early alpha. There are only a couple of components available so far, so don't go try to build plugins with it just yet. But you can check out the docs at canon.backstage.io to get an idea of where we're headed, and let us know what you think. Moving on to the documentation area, which is also a recent newcomer, one important piece of work has been to restructure the top-level navigation of the docs, which really helped clean up clutter to find things faster. Now, of course, we also have only show the documentation from the most recent release by default, rather than from the development branch. So this got rid of the confusion where you were seeing documentation for features that hadn't been released yet. A big task that's coming up is the creation of golden paths. So a shout out to Aramis for starting up work in this area already. But it's also a place where the core maintainers and our team plan to put quite a lot of effort as well. Builder experience in general is something that's going to be a larger priority for us now that we're wrapping up work in other areas. The goal is to create great end-to-end guides to build using both the new front-end and back-end systems. Speaking of those, let's switch over to Ben for some framework updates.
Yes. All right. We can start with this microphone, but then there's going to be a demo, so it's going to be kind of hard to do two things at once, hold this and also steer the screen. Okay, yeah, let's dive into some framework updates that are new over the last few months since last KubeCon. So first up is the backend system. Just to show of hands in the room, who uses Backstage today? Nice, quite a lot. So who's heard of the new backend system, new front-end system? Hands? Okay, good. That's good. Some people. So you might remember from our last talk in Salt Lake City, we encouraged everyone to start migrating their plugins and backend installations to the new backend system. Now, that recommendation still stands, like we haven't changed anything there. If you haven't done it yet, please go and do it. Now's the time. Many plugins in the main repository now no longer support the old backend system, and we'll expect the remaining few to be converted in the next few releases. If you're looking for ways to contribute also, this is a great opportunity. The community plugins repo has some opportunities if you go and contribute, migrate into the new backend system. And then onto the new frontend system. So before we dive into the new frontend system, let's take a little step back and look at how we got here. So we first introduced the new frontend system about a year and a half ago with an alpha release in about 2024. And at last KubeCon, we announced something called Blueprints, which basically are a feature designed to help you or simplify creation of extensions within the app. We also introduced new APIs to provide a well-defined way to override these extensions. And since then, we've been encouraging plugin authors to integrate support for the new front-end system alongside the old system, just so that we can kind of get some early feedback and just to make sure we're not missing anything and make sure we're not missing any patterns or functionality. So let's take a look at some of the new features that have been added since last KubeCon. So first up is multiple attachment points. Now, I need to start with a little recap of like how the front-end system works. And essentially, it's basically a tree of all different nodes connected together, which are the extensions, and they have inputs and outputs. And then we wire all these together, and then this is the front-end app that you get in the browser. Now, one challenge we ran into was handling extensions that need to be used in multiple places within that tree. A great example of this is TechDocs add-ons. So these extend the functionality in the TechDocs plugin. And these need to be attached in two places. So one on the entity page and one on the TechDocs reader page. So previously, to make this to work, we had to create two different extensions, maybe even two different blueprints, just to attach like the same extension into two different parts of the tree, which is just unnecessary extra work. So to solve this, we've introduced support for multiple attachment points, which allows the same extension to be attached into two different places in the tree. Entity pages in the front-end system, they had some challenges. Specifically, gaining control over the layout was pretty difficult. So you often had to build your own layout just to change it and make improvements. And in our previous talk in Salt Lake City, we also announced that we were working on migrating our internal version, so our one that we run at Spotify, to the new front-end system. And Patrick's going to cover a little bit more on that shortly. But as part of this process, we not only wanted to fix some of the issues with the entity pages, but we also decided to open source some of the internal improvements that we've made, changes that we think align pretty well with the new front-end system. So first off is tab groups. So at Spotify, we've got over 100 plugins. Many of them contribute tabs to the entity pages, and they can kind of lead up to a big horizontal scrolling nightmare with a lot of different plugins there. So we came up with the idea of tab groups. So you can group these tabs under a common pattern, and you've got a little drop down, and you go select it, making navigation so much easier. And finally is entity card types. So we introduced different types of cards to help you build better entity pages. And one especially useful addition is sticky cards. So you can place cards on the right-hand sidebar now. These are perfect for metadata, quick actions, important links, and they're going to stay visible as you scroll through the longer form content on the left. And lastly, we've introduced a new capability, which is middleware extension factories. So this allows you to globally modify extensions as they're being instantiated. So this opens up for a range of powerful opportunities. So for example, you can inject debugging, analytics across all the extensions without modifying each one individually. Another powerful use case is like A/B testing, where you can swap out extensions, maybe even just remove them entirely, just based on conditions chosen by the integrator. This feature also gives developers a lot more flexibility in managing extensions at scale, making it easier to experiment, monitor, and customize the app as a whole. And with that, I'm going to jump into a demo now, so showing some of these features. I'm really hoping this works, but we'll give it a go, as is tradition. You can hold it, thank you. My assistant, lovely. All right, let's give this a go. I'm going to jump over here and find the window. Yes, here we go. Ignore that bit. OK. Let's jump to here. So I want to jump to the new entity pages. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. There we go. So first off, to show, I can also look that way. I'll look here. So first off is the sticky cards on the right. So if I just scroll through the window here, you'll see that this content gets stuck as I scroll through. Nice. Last bit I want to show you real quick is just the grouping of the tabs. So you see we've got Kubernetes and tech docs here. If I jump over to our config, you'll see we've got this commented here. I'm just going to uncomment this like that. Save that. And then this updates. And now we have a tab group here for tech docs and APIs, which is nice. One last thing I want to show you is that we kind of tried to build a little bit more better dev tool experience for the extensions. So we used the middleware and provided this nice little view for extensions, so you can kind of dig in a little bit here to the entity graph one, for instance. I can see some configuration. Yeah, just a nice little experiment, I guess. Inspector. Nice. Let's jump back to this. And that worked. Did it work? Yes, it worked.
That's good. And this is good.
Yeah, nice. There you go.
All right. That's it for the demo. Now I want to talk a little bit about how we started migrating our internal project at Spotify to the new front-end system. So as part of the new system, we provide a top-down migration strategy where you switch out the root of the app first. Then with help of conversion utilities, you can lift over all your existing plugins into the new system. From that point, you then migrate each plugin one by one until the app is fully migrated. Here's what that looks like in code. You pass the existing structure to the conversion utility, and out comes features for the new system that you can install in the app. Now, we've shown this before, but there are two important additions since then. First is the new Convert Legacy App Options, which is a converter that takes options for the old Create App function and turns it into modules. So this is things like the themes and the sign-in page. It's just another little helper to make it a little bit easier to take the first step. And now the more important change is that you can now include the entity page structure in the conversion. It used to be that all entity page content was forklifted over as a single extension, which prevented this gradual migration that we want to enable. This new utility instead picks apart the entity pages and converts them all into separate extensions. That way you're no longer forced to migrate all plugins on the entity pages at once, and you can instead truly do this gradual migration. Hopefully you can't see that. Yeah, okay. With all that in place, that's what we're now running in our internal app at Spotify. What you see here is the list taken from the Visualizer plugin that shows all the different extensions in the new system. The app itself looks the same to our users, but what's really important is that we're now able to use the new front-end system for any new and existing plugins, even though there's plenty of work left to complete the migration. If you want to be on the bleeding edge, you can try this out as well in your own Backstage instance. We're always looking for feedback, and even if you might not ship it to production, you can try using the conversion utilities to see what the app looks like in the new system. Now, with that important milestone reached, we're finally ready to apply final polish and work on a stable release on the new front-end system. Now, let me hand over to Vincenzo for the last framework updates.
Thank you, Patrik. Cool. Last framework update is catalog model. So there is a big misconception we have heard during last year, which is that they believe that the Backstage catalog model is not extensible. Let me clarify this. This is not true. You can extend the Backstage catalog model, and there are great examples from the community. For instance, Christoph, one of the plugin maintainers, managed to ingest the inventory of his house into software catalog. Now, if you can ingest your coffee machine into software catalog, there is no doubt that software catalog is extensible enough. The real question here is, how easy is it to extend software catalog? So we look at that, and we saw room for improvements. And that's why today we're happy to announce that there is work in progress in this area, and soon you will be able to there will be an easier way for you to bring your custom entity kinds, tweak the existing entity kinds, and add relations between the entities. That's it so stay tuned. That's it for framework updates. Now, let's share some updates we have made to our own internal instance of Backstage that we use at Spotify. So first update that we have is about the front-end discovery. So this is how we deploy Backstage at Spotify. So each backend plugin is deployed on its own Backstage app in isolation. And as many of you already know, if you want to use split backends, you need to provide your own custom implementation of discovery service so that plugins can find each other, as in this example. But now, what about the front-end? Because the front-end also need to have access to all these backend plugins. So how do you do that? You have two options. Option one, you hardcode the URL of each backend plugin into the front-end. Or option two, you use a reverse proxy, adding some rules to expose all the backend plugins to the front-end. So this works great if you have a small set of plugins, but once your number of plugins start growing, it might add some friction. So what did you do instead? We call it gateway instance. So what did you do? We took the first one of these instances, let's say the one at the top. We implemented a new plugin called gateway, and then we connected the front end directly to this instance. Now, whenever the front end sends a request, the gateway plugin extracts the plugin ID from the request, use discovery service to resolve the URL of the correct backend plugin, and proxies the request. The good advantage of this is that if today we deploy a new backend plugin, that plugin will be exposed to the front end without any changes to your infrastructure. And if, in case some of you already use split backends, we are happy to announce that we are open sourcing this gateway plugin. So we aim to include it in the next Backstage release. Now, second updates we want to give you is how we made upgrading Backstage simpler by adopting the Backstage Yarn plugin. So this is something we released last year. This plugin is it's kind of magic. It's like it resolved the dependency of Backstage according to the version that you set in your Backstage JSON file. So, for example, on the right, you have an example of a package.json file, and as you can see, all the Backstage dependencies, there is no version there. There is just this Backstage correct thing, and that's because the Yarn plugin will take care about resolving the correct version for you. And this simplifies things a lot, because whenever you bump Backstage, the package.json won't change. So if you have a big instance with a lot of plugins, and each plugin has a different code owner, those code owners won't be pinged. So this is a great improvement, and we have some data here. Here we have all the line of changes you need to make in order to upgrade Backstage to the next version. And if you spot it in the graph, on version 32, there was a drop. And that's exactly when we released the Backstage Yarn plugin. So now, if you zoom in into one of these releases, let's say you are on version 36, and you want to bump to 37, the latest, this is what we have to do. You bump TypeScript, you introduce Canon, the new UI library, and you bump your Backstage JSON file. That's it. So if you are not using the Backstage Yarn plugin, we highly recommend you doing so. And now let's over to another important area of which is catalog.
Specifically, I'd like to talk a bit about how we use the software catalog at scale at Spotify. Our catalog is fairly large. We have quickly started approaching 500,000 entities, a large number of data source providers from different teams around the company, and yet it reacts in sub-second times to code changes in a globally distributed catalog where the primary database is kind of cruising along at a tiny fraction of capacity. But it was a bit of a journey to get there, so let's rewind a bit. Like most adopters do, we started with an out-of-the-box installation of the catalog. This is very convenient when getting started, and it works fine up to a certain point. But in this single deployment, all worker nodes do all types of work. I'm trying to indicate with the colors there. There's the read and write part of the API. There's internal machinery for ingestion and processing and more. And the requirements of those respective parts are actually quite different. Over time, more data sources were added, pushing the number of entities ever higher, and API traffic to the catalog was increasing. So more and more callers started to consume it. So let's have a look at what we did to scale up beyond the basics. One of the first things we did was to split the catalog apart into two deployments. So one deployment that handles only read traffic, and the other one deployment handles write traffic and ingestion. And that's a pretty small change in itself, but it actually gives significant benefits. So now we can auto-scale these deployments separately and give them different amounts of resources, which can lead to cost savings. And they also became decoupled in terms of load. So bursty load spikes from ingestion that are heavy can no longer affect latency and responsiveness of the read API. And lastly, we can also use lockdown database settings on the read deployment, which is good from a security perspective. A drawback is that we need to figure out traffic splitting. For example, writes should not end up on the read nodes because they're not actually able to serve them. This required a tiny bit of bespoke code to solve, but down the line, we hope to open source a way to let adopters more easily do the same out of the box. You can, but it needs a little bit of glue code. We're now in a great place for splitting both database and the service by geographical region as well. The write API and ingestion are only in the home region, right next to the read-write primary database, and the read API is moved over to a dedicated read-only secondary database and having streaming replication happening from the primary. And to this, we add more regions as needed. We have a bunch of regions at Spotify. So now we get even better per region scaling that follows the sun. Callers get fast responses from a nearby installation globally, and we free up database resources. So the primary database can focus on what it needs to do to serve its needs, and then changes stream over to the secondary replicas who only need to serve local reads. As for drawbacks, well, we're all suffering under the limitations of the annoyingly slow speed of light, right? And a small amount of replication lag because of that. When scaling up, it also becomes more and more important to be able to develop and experiment safely without hurting end users. This can be tricky, actually. Sometimes you find that you have to tweak database replication settings, for example, and make sure that they work well under load. Or one of your teams may want to deploy a massive new data source, and you need to make sure that it integrates nicely, without negatively affecting performance, or you want to exercise disaster recovery, that type of thing. So to help with this, we set up an identical pre-production cluster where we can safely move fast and break things. It's not just a minimal installation, it's a full-fledged copy with all of the same data and metrics, so it gives us the freedom to try things out at any time, including things with complex interactions. In the last 6 months, we've also spent a lot of time digging deep into the open telemetry and logs of the software catalog to find ways of making it even faster under heavy load. I can't go into all of the nitty-gritty details here, of course, but some examples are streaming of large responses to ensure a smooth load that does not block the event loop. You would be surprised how JSON serialization can mess with your latency. Identifying distinct hotspots that could be sped up and improving the database performance of some queries. Making sure that even if entity providers issue massive data dumps into the catalog, it responds to them gracefully without a hitch. And adding more metrics to help with both this and future improvements. Of course, all of this was changes that we made to the open source code, so it benefits everyone as you upgrade. And finally, we leaned fully into webhook-triggered events from GitHub to drive catalog updates. This means that when a user merges a change to a file, the catalog is immediately notified and processes it. After doing this, we were able to turn down the recurring processing loop to almost nothing. So you can see in these graphs how the load on the ingestion machines and the primary database fell to almost background noise levels, which is super nice. Yeah, we look forward to continuing improving the software catalog, both in terms of features and performance, and so watch this space. And that's it for now. Back to Patrik.
All right, thank you. To wrap up, just want to talk a little bit about the roadmap items in some other areas. First, quick update on splitting the CLI into modules. We've made a lot of the progress, thank you Aramis, but work is still ongoing. Another thing that we want to look at is refining our configuration system. We're seeing a lot of issues in the plugin ecosystem where configuration schema is not in sync with the implementation in the plugins. And we'll be looking for a way to just prevent those kind of issues from happening in the first place. Lastly, we're of course keeping our ears on the ground and have started looking into bringing integration via model context protocol into Backstage. This is a space where we want to rely on existing solutions as much as possible and only add the necessary glue to tie things together. Expect more updates in this area in the coming months. That's it. Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Yes, okay. Any questions?
If so, feel free to step up to the mic.
Thank you, Francesco.
I can break the ice. Congratulations, first of all. Huge steps ahead. I'm very curious about the MCP. So, I mean, MCP is a buzzword, and it's very exciting for every developer. How do you see the integration? Because MCP is usually coming from the AI space. How do you see the integration here?
I think there's some natural work to be done to tie things together, but we'll see exactly what we figure out to do. We'll talk about it more in the future. Indeed, KubeCon NA. Oh, yes. So if I understand the question correctly, it's if we plan to add any APIs to the scaffolder plugin so that you can call it programmatically, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, It depends what you mean by programmatically, because I guess right now you have the workflow itself, and you can execute like the template definition by an API. There is a CLI coming also. I'm hoping this is I'm on the right track here, answering your question. We have a CLI to execute those templates programmatically, or from a CLI, I guess. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Good. Okay. Good. Go on. You can also.
Yeah, and also in general, they already have APIs, right? These backends in general. It's just how they're exposed, right? So I mean, the front end already does these calls in the first place. It's more how accessible are they, and we're looking at making open API definitions properly for all of the backends over time. It just takes some time, but yeah, we'll get there.
Tricky bit is user authentication as well for the templates. So hopefully with CLI we can address that too. Yep. Okay.
My name is Sasha. I actually used to work in Spotify, so I know Backstage from both sides, from Spotify and outside. Now I work in Expedia. So there is one tool that probably internally you guys also use, which is C4 plugin for modeling, which is amazing. So when I moved to Expedia, I realized that you don't offer it to external customers, so I'm wondering why is that? Because it's an amazing tool. Just wondering if there's any plan to expose it to external customers.
I'm just wondering if you...
Because it's in your blogs, like Spotify blog published about it, how amazing the tool is, so it's not like a secret. I know
this guy down here might have an answer.
It's boring. It's built with internal technology, so it's not just easy to ship with Backstage. That's the boring part. I agree with you.
It breaks my heart. Okay.
So built with internal technology, tricky to ship.
Please do that. A second question, can I quickly ask? I've seen also a pattern of engineers, sometimes when they create something from Backstage, they don't want to rename things because they can't quite track how many places changed the ID and what was provisioned, so they prefer just to kill the project instead of trying to rename it. So I wonder if you try to do something with usability perhaps as well, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. No, I don't have a straight answer right now for a better fix. We're looking into making things more reactive, like we said, with webhooks and so on. But the naming of things, those are really external references. So if A claims that I depend on B, then A needs to change that claim, right? That's just an unfortunate reality of it. We'd love to look into better tooling for this. And if any ideas are very welcome, in the community or in issues and so on, and we're happy to look at it. But I don't have a good answer right now for that particular one.
Thank you.
And thank you. We're at time, everyone? Yeah? So thank you for coming.
Thank you all.
Yeah.